We have Rita Beving presenting on this very timely and important subject. Rita Beving has a 30-year history of advocating for citizens on environmental and energy issues. She currently works with several nonprofits, including consulting for Livable Arlington. Rita has also worked professionally and as a volunteer for both Public Citizen, Sierra Club, and the Clean Water Fund. Rita also serves on the Dallas Environmental Commission as a technical advisor. Previously, she was the vice chair of the Environmental Task Force that served as the interim committee on the Dallas Comprehensive Environmental and Climate Action Plan. Rita has lobbied at the state capitol both as a volunteer and as a registered lobbyist since 2000. She has also lobbied Congress on various other issues. In Texas, Rita has worked on a variety of environmental issues statewide, including those addressing issues on fracking, the permitting of the Keystone XL and Trans-Pecos pipelines, oil and gas land farms, landfills, cement kilns, concrete batch plants, and also worked with former Mayor Laura Miller regarding the denial of permits for more than a dozen coal plants statewide. She is a graduate of Iowa State University and resides in the Dallas area with her husband, attorney David Griggs. So again, today she'll be presenting on the highlights of energy and environmental bills in this latest legislative session. We ask that if you have questions that you add them to the chat and we will address those at the end. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for the slides. All right, and over to you, Rita. Thanks for being here.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you, Livable Arlington, for having me this evening. Here we are, just one day into the special session, and I'll hit some highlights of that at the end of this presentation. As Chioma mentioned, I work with Public Citizen. If you're not familiar with Public Citizen, it is a national nonprofit organization based in Washington, D.C., founded by Ralph Nader. And other than our D.C. office, the only other office we have is in Austin. And in our Austin office, we primarily focus on energy and environmental bills. Our DC office works a lot on consumer issues, campaign finance reform, and a lot of different issues. So I'm happy to be here tonight. I am going to give you some overall bill highlights, and then I'll give you a little insight into the special session that started yesterday. So with that, let's go on to the next slide. So just what were the governor's priority issues this past session? If you weren't aware, at the beginning of the session, Governor Abbott usually has basically a State of the Union address where he lines out his priorities. And this session, he established the following as priorities, and I know you've heard about them in the news over the last few months: school vouchers, the lowering of property taxes, water infrastructure, THC and cannabis products, establishing higher education oversight, DEI, concerns about books and book bans, and more control over schools overall. Also, as you know, the Texas lottery almost got banned. The governor wanted a Bitcoin reserve, and he got it. And other bills surrounding abortion, election, transgender bills also came up during this session. Next slide. So, how does a bill become law in Texas? I'm going to give you the short version. But first, let me say that over 8,700 bills were filed this past session. And if you'd count all the joint resolutions, the commemorative bills, etc., there would have been over 11,000. More than 3,500 of those bills passed both chambers and went to the governor, and only 26 were vetoed. So, how does a bill become law? Well, I've written language for bills. You pull up the appropriate statute. If it's an environmental bill, it probably falls under the Natural Resource Code. You pull up the statute, you do what we call mark up the bill. You add new language or strike out old language, whatever. You bring it to a legislator, either in the House or the Senate. See if you can get someone to sponsor your bill. The bill, as you marked it up with that legislator, goes to legislative council, who checks the bill that it will comply with state statute. It won't fly in the face of law already established. And then when it comes back to that legislator's office, it will be designated for a specific committee, whether it's in the House or the Senate. That committee chair holds a lot of power where that bill goes to, because the committee chair can totally decide not to hear your bill at all. So if they so desire, in either chamber. If the bill originates in the House and is heard in committee and is passed out of its respective committee, it will go to the Calendars Committee. The Calendars Committee is one of the most powerful committees in the House. It's where some bills live and die, and some of us as lobbyists go to kill bills. What happens with calendars on the House side, the Calendars Committee gets to decide if a bill moves to the House floor. If you want to slow down a bill, we tag it, or a legislator tags it. What that means is they basically say, no, we're not going to hear this bill to go to the floor anytime soon. So that legislator tags it. Then you find another legislator to tag it, and you can tag and tag and tag a bill. This is particularly useful toward the end of session when you have all sorts of deadlines, because you can basically push a bill over the cliff that it never gets to the House floor. Well, let's say your bill gets out of calendars. Then it goes to a floor debate and a vote in the House. From there, if it passes the House, it will go over to its respective committee in the Senate. Once again, that bill will be assigned to a committee, and the committee chair can make the decision to hear your bill or not hear it. Let's say your bill's passed the House and it's in the Senate, and it's gone through the Senate committee and it passes. If it passes unanimously, a senator can recommend it for local and consent, which means it fast tracks it to the Senate floor. Or it goes to what we call the intent calendar. The intent calendar is kind of like a waiting room. 5/9 of the Senate have to approve that the bill can come to the floor for debate. Sometimes you will see bills be on intent calendar and be off intent calendar. That's because they didn't get enough votes to go to the floor. But once that bill does make it to the floor debate in the Senate, that's where the votes are taken. So bills, nonetheless, have to pass both chambers before it can go to the governor. This past session, the governor had until June 20th to approve or veto a bill. If he doesn't physically sign the bill, but the bill lingers through the 20th, then it automatically becomes law. So that's how a bill becomes law. Next slide. So, what were the major environmental topics of session? The absolute biggest topic this session was water, water, and more water. Senator Perry was the water czar of the legislature, and funding was appropriated to support water projects. Other issues that are regular issues during most sessions include air and climate. Bills were offered to consider climate impacts and how it affects the state and how our agencies could mitigate for climate impacts. Cumulative impacts of permits, especially air permits. Namely, if you have an air permit for one industry, there were attempts to get the TCEQ to consider the other polluting industries around the one being permitted and to be considered in an air permit. There were efforts to broaden notice. Those bills were aimed at notifying a legislator, namely a senator or representative, if a permit was applied for in their district. Also, there was an effort to give legislators notice if an industry had been penalized within their district. Other bills were aimed at the grid to once again strengthen the grid and build resiliency. Over 20 concrete bills were filed this session to expand the setbacks on concrete batch plants, provide more notice. These are big issues in Houston and Dallas with concrete batch plants. There were lots of transportation bills, bills to promote clean buses, bills that would hurt DART, bills to regulate EVs, bills to regulate autonomous vehicles, because we really don't have any rules. Also on mass transit to kill the high-speed rail between Houston and Dallas, and excuse me, and to promote transit. Excuse me, guys, I have a cold. Between San Antonio and Dallas. Excuse me again. Lastly, there were bills to expedite mining permits specifically for uranium and take us out of the mining compact. Next slide. Excuse me. Okay, let's talk about the good environmental bills that passed. This first one is one of my favorites. HB 29 by Gertie's would require cities with 150,000 water connections to mitigate water loss. Between Dallas and Fort Worth, we lose more than 23.5 billion gallons of water due to leaks, excuse me, and water main breaks. This bill would require cities to have mitigation plans and to actually execute those plans. And if they weren't properly followed, there would be penalties for those cities. Our 5 largest cities lose over 88 billion gallons of water a year. HB 517 by Harris Davila disallows HOAs, excuse me, for giving fines for brown vegetation during drought or water restrictions. SB 7 was the big water bill of session. It places $1 billion annually into an infrastructure fund for the next 20 years. This money can be used for wastewater treatment plants, water reuse, water infrastructure. I am personally a little concerned about the money being allocated for reservoirs, but there's a lot of good things that can be funded with SB 7. SB 2351 by Alvarado requires protectiveness review for the standard permit of a concrete batch plant every 6 years. Currently, it's 10. Probably the worst bill that was defeated in the environment this session was HB 4313 by Cecil Bell of Magnolia. This bill disallows political subdivisions from using public funding for environmental projects. What this bill would basically do, everyone, is kill all the climate plans in our state. It would kill the pollution reduction plan that our local COG has put out. It would negate all sorts of air programs in our various COGs and various places. Next slide. Again, excuse me, everyone. Sorry about that. So let's talk about good energy bills that were offered. HB 459 by Representative Rosenthal of Houston wanted to have a bill that eliminated routine flaring of natural gas wells. HB 1230 by our own Representative Turner from Grand Prairie and Arlington would require any oil and gas operation located within 1,500 feet of a daycare or private school to have a public meeting and public comment considered before the Railroad Commission could grant a permit. HB 1169 by Raymond would require the Railroad Commission to adopt a comprehensive plan to protect wellheads during a natural disaster. For those of you who may not be aware, during Storm Uri, part of the problem the natural gas plants went down is because the water tanks where natural gas was drilled would freeze. They didn't drain their water tanks. And when the water tanks freeze, the natural gas will not flow to those gas plants. HB 3237 by Representative Turner would require state agencies, political subdivisions, and higher ed institutions to lower energy consumption 5% over 6 years. There already is a bill in place that does this, but it expires in 2026. Lastly, HB 4891 by Eddie Morales would require financial security for the operation of a commercial disposal facility for oil and gas waste. If you aren't familiar with land farms for oil and gas, this is a big problem, especially in East Texas. A land farm is a pit with 4-foot berms. They deposit oil and gas sludge within those pits with the idea that the toxic emissions and the VOCs, etc., would dissipate into the air, rendering the sludge not so hazardous. The problem is they leak and they flood. As we have all seen with the flooding recently in Texas, you can imagine how much rain in East Texas. It doesn't take much to overtop a 4-foot berm. And I've worked on these kind of issues out in around the state. Next slide. By the way, I want to mention on those bills that I said were offered, none of them passed. So make note, there were a lot of good bills offered, and unfortunately, a lot of them either didn't get a hearing or they didn't make it through one chamber or another or both. So let's talk about the good energy bills that were signed this session by the governor. HB 145 by Representative King, who also happens to be the chair of State Affairs, was very concerned because he's from Canadian in the Panhandle about the huge wildfire that occurred up there last summer. So he established a bill that would require electric utilities to be adequately insured, to have plans in case of a wildfire, and that would include not just communication plans, but also mitigation plans to prevent wildfires. Another bill he carried was that distribution poles need to be inspected by utilities to double check whether they're prone to wildfire. HB 5323 by Representative King creates the Texas Waste Advisory Committee to reduce energy waste, increase efficiency, and enhance demand response. This is the closest we came this session to having any kind of energy efficiency bill. Many of us in the environmental community have tried to get the legislature to focus more on conservation and efficiency. And this is as close as we came when it came to electricity and energy waste. House Bill 2586 by Representative Dean from East Texas requires frac tanks to be registered and fitted with an ID plate. HB 3619 by Dean requires the Railroad Commission to restore land to its original state if the agency plugs or replugs a well. I'm not sure everyone is familiar with what happens sometimes when land is restored or companies are contracted to plug a well. Sometimes they literally just take the dirt and bulldoze it over. So this bill would require better land restoration. Senate Bill 75 by Senator Hall from Rockwall creates the Texas Grid Security Commission to make recommendations on grid security and resilience. Both this session and last session, there were flurries of bills passed regarding loans to build more natural gas plants, on weatherization of power plants, and so on and so forth. We had quite a few bills passed. The idea of the Grid Security Commission is to look at what's all been passed the last two sessions and maybe find where there are things that need to be strengthened or tweaked. Then we have Senate Bill 1145 by Birdwell. He's from Granbury. This bill would require the TCEQ to develop standards for produced water used for land applications. All of you know about the catastrophe in Johnson County and other counties with what we call beneficial water, and I'm putting that in air quotes. And the good news is the Railroad Commission will no longer get to issue those permits. It will be under the jurisdiction of the TCEQ, and they will establish standards for produced water. So those are the good bills that were signed within the energy area. Next slide. So I want to talk about renewable bills because there were a lot of renewable bills offered this session, and some of them were really terrible bills, but we did have good renewable bills signed. One big emphasis this session is on battery storage plants, or BESS, which stands for Battery Energy Storage Systems. There is a growing concern, especially in rural communities, about how fast battery storage systems permits are being applied for in rural areas. I just left Paris in Lamar County just a few weeks ago, where 5 battery plants are being put forward in that community. I attended a public meeting, and I will tell you, there is all sorts of disinformation being fed to our small communities and rural neighbors in order to scare off the development of battery storage. So I'm glad some of these bills passed because I think it'll bring people some comfort. And here are some of them here on this list. HB 3228 and 3229 by Lambert requires the recycling or authorized disposal of commercial solar, wind, and battery facilities. I will tell you what prompted this bill. Out in the panhandle, within eyeshot of I-40 near or not, I think it's I-40, near Sweetwater, there were literally wind blades piling up on land that you could see from the freeway. It was an eyesore. It was making a lot of communities and landowners upset, and something needed to be done with these wind blades, etc. So this bill would require the recycling or authorized disposal of all those components. If there's hazardous materials, it will have to be put in an authorized hazardous landfill. HB 3809 by Darby establishes the responsible decommissioning of battery storage if for whatever reason that battery storage system is closed down. Lastly, another good bill regarding battery storage, 3824 by Representative Ken King, has the state fire marshal developing standards and testing for battery storage. This should put a lot of the fears, hopefully, aside for a lot of communities regarding battery storage. Okay, now on this slide, you'll see Senator Zaffirini. We call her the Dean of the Senate. She's the longest serving senator. She's filed some very good renewable bills that got signed. Senate Bill 1036 would require solar salespersons to be registered and licensed, providing penalties if they are not. Basically, we have had in recent years a crop of solar salespeople that, frankly, are promising the moon to consumers who want to install solar on their homes. And some of these solar salespeople are making promises that solar cannot even provide. So this will go to the Texas Department of Licensing. And so from now on, solar salesperson will have to be registered and licensed. Another good bill by Senator King of Weatherford, Senate Bill 1202, would expedite the municipal permitting for backup power generation by allowing a third party to review documents. What this does, some of our cities are already behind in permitting for developers and on projects. What this does, it allows the hiring of a third party qualified reviewer to review the documents. And if once those documents are reviewed within 15 days, he would submit that to the municipality. So there is a timeline included so that backup power generation for residential does not get held up for those who want it. Lastly, on this page, also by Senator Zaffirini, she's from Laredo, is Senate Bill 1697. And this bill would require the PUC to develop a purchasing and installation guide for solar. Again, this stems from some of the shady dealings that the public has dealt with unqualified solar salespersons to kind of give them a guide on how to purchase solar and what they should look for when they want to get a solar system. Next slide. So, as always, we have bad bills signed during session, and I will go over those as well as the ones that are defeated, because sometimes what we kill in the legislative session is almost a bigger win than getting your bill through. Uh, let's talk about bad energy bills that the governor signed. HB 14 by Representative Harris would give advanced nuclear reactors a blank check for funding projects. Our organization, along with many environmental organizations, do not support advanced nuclear reactors, though we've all heard that it produces little to no waste. We are very opposed to a blank check because in some states like Utah and other places, some of these advanced nuclear reactors will be on the books for 15 and 17 years and never be built. This bill was supported by both Democrats and Republicans, and many of us fought hard against this bill because throwing money at this project, at these kind of projects that may never get built, is not a prudent use of state money. Okay, so another bill which would be of interest to the folks in Johnson County is HB 49 by Darby. This bill expands the use of oil and gas wastewater, leaving for, again, air quote, beneficial use, but leaves landowners holding the bag if something happens with produced water contaminating their land. Let me tell you, the oil and gas lobby is absolutely the largest lobby we deal with industry in the building. And it's hard to get anything passed that is productive from our point of view to, rein in some of the emissions and the contamination from this industry. Next, we have HB 2890 by Representative Patterson of Frisco. Representative Patterson, frankly, has carried several bills to support LNG, liquid natural gas, and anti-renewable bills this session. His HB 2890 establishes a Gulf States LNG industry compact. That compact is to promote the use of liquid natural gas. And for those of you who may not know, there are 6 LNG terminals now under construction or almost finished on the Gulf Coast. HB 3536 by Vasut allows the Park and Wildlife Department to deny structures over 575 feet tall, namely wind farms, on the Gulf Coast in places where wildlife refuges are wholly or partially located and where there is populations under 500,000. When this bill was first introduced, it actually caught, the way it was written, would have caught SpaceX missile launch tower into this bill. But it was amended and fixed, so it would not capture Elon Musk's SpaceX military launch pad. SB 1252 by Schwartner would disallow cities from creating an ordinance to regulate or inspect residential battery systems. Now, I think it's prudent with the installation of anything around our homes that we have somebody who's qualified to be able to check and make sure that it is installed properly. So I think this was part of an effort to again expedite those residential battery systems, but it's still good to have a check and balance with your municipality to be able to double check how your residential battery was installed. Lastly, on this page, another pro LNG bill by Sparks, who's from the, West Texas. Senate Bill 2037 would expedite the TCEQ permits for LNG terminals with firm timelines. We do not have that for any other industrial use, not coal plants, not landfills, not any industrial use, but we do now for LNG terminals. All right, let's move on to the next slide. So these are bills that I call ugly. And what I mean by that is there are some good components of the bill and there are some bad components of the bill. So, you have to take the good and the bad and the ugly. So Senate Bill 6, which is the same number it was offered under last session, supports money to be added to the Texas Energy Fund. As most of you know, last session, there was lots of money allocated to fund new natural gas plants. They've done it again. This session, they add $5 billion to the Texas Energy Fund, again, to mostly support natural gas plants. That is the ugly part of this bill. The good news is, as opposed to last session, they've included $1.8 billion for backup power programs. So that is the good part of SB 6. Now, SB 1150 by Mays Middleton from Galveston, this bill requires operators to clean up abandoned wells within 15 years. But here's the bad part. It also establishes that certain well operators are no longer liable for inactive wells after a certain period of time. The other good component of this bill is it will require the Railroad Commission to produce a report on how many abandoned wells have been plugged and how many are still outstanding that they have identified. So those are the ugly energy bills that were signed. Next slide. So sometimes all of us, I would say, whether you're in Sierra Club, Public Citizen, Environment Texas, we really take pride in some of the worst bills that we can kill by the end of session because they would have a devastating effect on the environment or for industry, especially the renewable industry this session. So, what were some of those bills that we, and thanks to many of you who signed letters or made calls, defeated? HB 3056 by Verdell would require a 500-yard setback for wind or solar in a city or county. Another bill similar, HB 1378 by Verdell, would require a 500-yard setback for a battery electric storage system that is a commercial unit. Senate Bill 383 by Middleton would just ban offshore wind altogether, basically, in state waters from connecting to ERCOT, basically negating offshore wind. Next, Senate Bill 388 by Senator King would set a standard goal of 50% dispatchable energy starting in January 2026. And for those who aren't aware, dispatchable energy refers specifically to coal, and natural gas, and nuclear. In other words, it would once again try to negate the future development of solar and wind in this state. Senate Bill 715 by Sparks, and again a companion by Representative Patterson, would require annual firming requirements on generation. So what's firming requirement? A firming requirement is that on a daily basis, a natural gas plant would produce X amount of megawatts of power. Now, we all know the wind doesn't blow every day and the sun doesn't shine every day. So what they could not consistently produce, they would have to get backup generation to make up the difference for what they can't produce on those days when the sun doesn't shine or the wind doesn't blow. Or penalties would apply. Now, there was a caveat to this, that renewables could have backup generation to make up the difference for that firming requirement. But thank goodness this bill never passed. Lastly, and this was the holy grail of bad bills that we killed, was Senate Bill 819 by Senator Colhorst from Brenham. This bill put lots of complications in trying to build a renewable facility, be it wind or solar. It would allow for environmental impact statements. We don't even do that for other power generation. I will tell you, on the Keystone XL pipeline, granted that was an interstate pipeline, that we call it an EIS. It was over 3,000 pages where you have to analyze rivers, stream crossings, marshes, wetlands, impacts to land, air, on and on. The bill had setbacks. It was going to allow for counties to have hearings and have disapprovals on renewables. And the bill was layered up with all sorts of caveats to scare away future wind and solar development. That bill died in the House, and I will give Representative Ken King, the head of state affairs, a lot of credit for this. He's from Canadian, where he has wind in his backyard up in the Panhandle. SB 819, SB 715 all came to his committee on the 22nd of April. They never got a hearing. And I credit him for why these bills went no further. So, next slide. So, now we're at the special session. What started out a week or two ago was like 6 bills, that what we call cleanup bills for a special session, grew into a proclamation of 18 topics that the governor wants addressed in this special session. One, of course, is of urgency. We all saw what happened in the Hill Country. And so disaster preparedness and relief are listed on the special session. Bills have already been filed. Redistricting. There will be a redistricting hearing Thursday. There'll be one in Houston a few days later, and there'll be one in Arlington on Monday. I'll get to that in a minute. The regulation of THC products. There was a hearing on uh, THC products today in Senate State Affairs. There's going to be more discussion on cutting property taxes, banning taxpayer-funded lobbying, and this is quite alarming, and I'll discuss that a little more in a second. Title theft and deed fraud, where if somebody gets a hold of your information about your residence, they can actually sell your house from underneath you. There's efforts to prevent deed fraud. Eliminating the STAR test for schools. There are supposed to be bills on human trafficking and prostitution, women's privacy, and abortion. And when I'm talking women's privacy, we're talking about separate bathrooms and being in the bathroom of the gender you were born in. Lastly, allowing the Attorney General to prosecute election crimes and other judicial practices and procedures. Okay, next slide. So there are bills already filed. There are over 210 bills filed. 195 of them are in the House. Here are some of concerns to those of us who follow the environment. HB 155 by Bell. This is the bill that we killed during the regular session, HB 4313. He has refiled it to deny any public subdivision from using taxpayer money to fund an environmental project. Again, this would kill all the climate plans in the state that cities have devised or COGs have devised. It would kill a lot of programs around TERP, the Texas Emissions Reduction Plan, that have to do with vehicles, is a blanket bill with just a few exceptions, but it's targeted at bills that are supposed to deal with emissions. The bill's just been filed. It hasn't been assigned to a committee. I will be looking at it very closely because it affects my work directly on the Environmental Commission for the city of Dallas. SB 12 was heard today in Senate State Affairs. It's Mays Middleton bill from Galveston. It denies any public subdivision from using taxpayer funds for lobbying. 9 more bills have been filed like this. Basically, I don't care if you're a sheriff's association, your HOA, your COG, your county, your city, you will not be able to use taxpayer funds for lobbying. And in our mind, it's ludicrous to think our city council persons are supposed to be practically living down at the legislature off session to testify at a moment's notice on bills or walk the halls and lobby on a daily basis. That's what the Texas Municipal League is often used for by cities and counties. There's the Association of Counties, etc. I know the city of Dallas lobbyists, there's 2 or 3 of them. Taxpayer lobbying for the city of Dallas is less than 1% of the budget. And as we know, we have had lots of situations in the last few sessions where local control continues to be eroded. Which, with that said, notice the bill picture on your screen of HB 2127. We called that the Death Star bill last session. That particular bill is the holy grail of killing local control. It would hurt cities regarding all sorts of regulations, whether it's negating uh, pet stores from using puppy mills, payday lenders, uh, uh, some things on safety, on the environment, etc. This bill has now been litigated for over 2 years. I know the Solicitor General of Houston. I emailed her yesterday because if you haven't heard, the bill uh, was pers- uh, the city of Houston won against this bill in Travis County. Then it went up to the Third Court of Appeals. And unfortunately, I think it was announced Friday or Thursday that the Third Court of Appeals rejected the city of Houston's and other cities' arguments. So where they are right now is Houston is talking to its uh, co-counsel on whether they are going to continue to proceed on HB 2127. So stay tuned. I am going to follow this bill uh, as long as it proceeds. So you can stay in contact with me on it. Um, One thing I want to mention, because it's not always that we have hearings in our backyard, is redistricting is coming to our backyard on Monday. Redistricting hearings will be held at the Rosebud Theater at the University of Texas in Arlington at 5 p.m. on Monday. Uh, it has been announced just outright that the Republican Party wants to gain 5 more seats, congressional seats in Texas. It will also affect, of course, our Texas legislature. Uh, so if you want to go to that redistricting hearing, how these hearings usually work, I can't guarantee you that everything always works the same, but naturally it's when you get there, you usually sign up to speak. It's usually done on a first come, first served basis. If this was a hearing at the Capitol, it would be for 3 minutes. Uh, but um, they are expecting big crowds, so it may be as small as 2 minutes for testimony. So with that, let's go to the last slide. So if you want to stay connected on legislative matters, during regular session, I have legislative calls once the session's rolling almost every single week. Um, and you can email me at rita.beving@gmail.com if you want a list of the environmental and energy bills that uh, I tracked that the governor signed into law. I'd be happy to forward it to you. Another thing you can do during session is many of the environmental and energy groups are part of the Alliance for Clean Texas. It's a network of 30 to 40 organizations that track bills every single week during session. And we send out action alerts by which you can write your legislators, usually with a click or send letter. So anyway, so that concludes my presentation and I'm good for questions.
Thank you, Rita, for unpacking the good, bad, and ugly of the energy and environmental bills from this past session. I think what we can do, I know we have quite a few questions in the chat, though we will get to those, but I want to start with the folks who've raised their hands. So David, you want to start us off?
Well, sure. Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on on what's going forward. This is, a very critical issue, and it's almost existential for any of our progressive views that we don't let the legislature do what they're trying to do on redistricting. It's probably the most important thing before us right now, and the hearings that are going to be happening next week, the one in Arlington, is at the University of Texas at Arlington. I've got an address here. It's 300 West First Street. And as Rita said, it's going to be at the Rosebud Center starting at 5 o'clock. They originally said that sign up would start at 4:30, 30 minutes ahead. They've changed that now to a 1 hour before because they're expecting a lot of folks. They are limiting the testimony to only 5 hours. They do not want to go late into the evening. So they're going to have literally hundreds and hundreds of people, we think, there. They're giving each person 2 minutes. So a lot of folks will not get to speak, even though they sit there all that time. So just know that if you really want to speak, if you know the subject well and you want to have your 2 minutes worth of testimony, then you better get there at 4. I'm planning to be there very early because I do want to testify. So that's happening. A lot of rallies are also going on. I just was on a call with Fair Maps Texas, and they are trying to get this information as quickly as possible. There's going to be some kind of rally that afternoon at UT Arlington. Apparently, they're having a bit of trouble with the university in finding a place that they will allow literally hundreds of people, maybe thousands of people to demonstrate. So the people organizing this don't really know anything about Arlington, so that's a problem from what I'm understanding. So they're in negotiations trying to find a place for this huge demonstration go along with the testimony. A lot of people won't be able to testify, but they want to be there to voice their concerns. So anyway, that's what I know about that. Fairmapstexas.org is a good source for information if you want to follow up on it. But that's all I know.
Thank you for the additional information. Kim, you want to go ahead?
You. Yes, Rita, you've tracked a lot for us. Do you know anything about bills related to the so-called um, portable nuclear plants that they're trying to develop to service data centers and businesses and AI?
All I can really tell you, Kim, is that they've right now, what the bill does for the advanced nuclear reactors is basically throw money at it. One thing I want to mention to everyone about these bills, oftentimes when a bill gets passed, it is a framework by which whatever agency, let's say it's TCEQ and it's concrete batch plants, the agency then flushes out the details of the bill in rulemaking. So a lot of these bills, uh, I'm sure, like the application for the money for the nuclear reactors, they're going to have to be flushed out. Um, but, you know, uh, right now, the way I read the bill in its last form, there was no limit uh, on that funding. And that's very concerning. Because like I said, there are some states that have had nuclear, advanced nuclear reactor projects sitting around for 15 and 17 years with money thrown at them that were never built. So sorry, I don't have more for you.
I have one follow-up question, and we talked about this when I ran into you the other day. So the Supreme Court recently ruled in June against the state of Texas and for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, allowing the NRC to allow a private company to store nuclear waste from all of our nuclear plants on a temporary basis in West Texas. So we would become the nuclear dumping ground of the country. And those temporary caskets would come through, primarily through DFW on their way to the oil and gas fields of West Texas. So with this special session, since Governor Abbott was quoted as saying, "Over my dead body," is there any movement by anyone to try to address and stop that from happening?
Well, I will tell you, Representative Landgraf, who is the head of Environmental Regulation Committee, actually carried a bill to prevent high-level nuclear waste from coming through Texas. Unfortunately, it didn't happen in the end with the governor. There are, from what I scanned of the 195 House bills, there wasn't anything offered on nuclear waste so far this session. Now, sometimes you can come up with other creative ways, maybe on how it's transported or where it's transported to make it undesirable or very hard, just like we tried to do with the solar, wind, and battery plants. But so far, nothing's offered. So I'll keep on it though, Kim. If I hear, I will shoot you an email. Okay.
Thank you.
Ranjana, go ahead.
Hello, this
Thank
is
you.
Jackie Cox. I had a question, if I may ask it. Rita, what I'm really concerned with, and David may address this also, is that now that Trump has pretty much disbanded the science part of the EPA, I wonder how, if at all, anything can be enforced, because there won't be any science repository with that backs up the rules. I mean, it's kind of a, did they just pull the plug?
Well, Jackie, I do work on some congressional issues, like I work on ethylene oxide. I work on oil and gas pipelines. I just testified the other week, guys, believe it or not, they want to roll back the mercury rule on coal plants and take us back 30 years. They will probably suspend the rule on ethylene oxide for sterilizer plants. So this is kind of where we are. There are all these attempts right now, Jackie, to roll back or give extensions on new rules that are being passed. There is a bill this week to be voted on in Congress regarding the Clean Air Act with rollbacks. I will tell you, I have made calls to EPA officials where the phone's not even answered, or it's taken me a week and a half to even find somebody at Region 6 to talk to. It is a dark time for environmental laws in this country, and all that's left to us really is to fight them and litigate them. Litigation is our best friend right now, so we'll have to see how it all plays out.
But the courts aren't our best friends anymore, are they?
Well, there's many that aren't, that's for sure.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Ranjana, you were going to say something.
Oh, yeah, thanks. Rita, I had a question about House Bill 1230 filed by Representative Turner.
Mhm.
a bill that would have required public hearings before the Railroad Commission could issue permits for gas wells within 1,500 feet of schools and daycares.
Uh-huh.
As you know, and probably everybody here knows, that bill is critical for Arlington. And I was curious if the city of Arlington offered any support for it or lobbied for it. Would
Thanks for that question. Unfortunately, Rajna, Representative Turner's bill did not even get a hearing. And I just want to mention this. It's unfortunate. I will tell you, any bills that cost oil and gas money or time, it's not unusual sometimes for them not to even get a hearing. The same thing with concrete bills. There were 20 concrete bills offered this session, over 30 offered last session. Only one concrete bill got heard and passed this session. If a chair, like Representative Landgraf, who chairs Environmental Reg, doesn't want to allow a bill to be heard, it won't get heard. And that is the power of chairman. The only good thing this session was supposedly the vice chairs that were Democrats would be allowed to ask for a bill to be pulled up. I tried that on a few bills that were important to me, but it didn't happen. And it's not uncommon, guys, that lots and lots and lots of bills never get a hearing.
Okay, thank you. I just want to say a similar bill when it was filed 4 years ago, or maybe, yes, about 4 years ago. We had a different mayor, Mayor Williams, and he offered unanimous resolution of support for that bill and for the Senate version of it. And I had a copy of it when I went to lobby at the Capitol and to testify in committee in support of it. And so it's very disappointing to see.
Okay. Paula, go ahead.
Great, thank you. Thanks for putting this on, and Rita, thank you for all your knowledge. I just want to share real briefly that I'm here attending today, and I've gotten interested in these issues because I have found myself in the middle of a landfill battle in East Texas in the town area called Elysian Fields, which is a non-incorporated rural community of a couple hundred people in East Texas. And it turns out that I own land that's directly adjacent to this horrible solid oil and gas waste landfill that's been permitted. And I want to just bring attention to this issue for everybody's awareness that because it relates to the water issue, and I just want to give a 2-minute pitch here. These things are being permitted left and right by the Railroad Commission that are these horrible toxic landfills holding this soil and dirt that's contaminated with drilling fluids and full of all kinds of caustic chemicals. And as I understand it, a lot of this waste isn't even coming from Texas drilling, but this is Louisiana waste. These things are being built all along the Texas-Louisiana border. And because this stuff is harder to dispose of in Louisiana, they're using Texas as the dumping ground for this toxic mess. And in this case, the land that got permitted is sitting right on top of the Carrizo-Wilcox Aquifer. It's the second largest aquifer in Texas, major water drinking source for the state of Texas. And Railroad Commission is just like willy-nilly letting them build these things anywhere. This one also happens to sit on a freshwater creek. Seems like not a good place for me to put a toxic landfill on top of the drinking water supply in a creek. But they're doing this. And what's happening, and Rita did this bill with all the infrastructure money, I think some of it's going to build pipelines because what's happening right now is there's this water grab starting that the rapidly growing central Texas cities like Austin, San Antonio, and even Dallas-Fort Worth, who are growing so fast, your growth is outstripping your water supply. And everyone's realizing, oh, there's this lush
Hi,
part of
Sharon, how are you?
there's this lush part of East Texas that has excess water. So now there's all this private equity people coming in to East Texas, buying up acres and acres of land to get the water rights, and they're asking for water drilling permits from Railroad Commission, and then they want to ship all this water to the thirsty cities. But I'm trying to wave the red flag and to tell people, does anybody realize that this water now everybody's fighting about as this valuable, the new oil and gas of Texas, that upstream of that water that people are buying is our landfill that's polluting the water supply. And it just seems like nobody at the Texas legislature or the Railroad Commission has any eye on the ball, that at the same time there's this water shortage and struggle over who's going to control future water rights, we're polluting the very water that people are starting to fight about. And I guess that's just kind of my background. My specific question, Rita, is I'm an attorney myself. I don't live in Texas any longer. I grew up there and I have this land. It's been in my family since the 1850s. Um, but I'm smart. I'm an attorney, and so I can help like draft proposed legislation. And I want to help this community in the next session to propose some improvements because I've seen just how embarrassingly inadequate the Railroad Commission, the laws are in Texas about for TCEQ and Railroad Commission on these landfill sites. How does one go about finding a sponsor for a bill? Because the local representatives and senators from these counties don't care at all about the people and aren't trying to help. So, we were kind of involved in something that you didn't mention this bill, but there was an energy bill that got passed. Zaffarini sponsored it, and it had to do with these solid waste landfills. And it was kind of one of those good and bad bills where somebody proposed a bad bill and she made it better, but it was still a stinky bill that passed. Because these permits that had been 5-year renewals got extended to 10-year renewals. But the good news was that it told the Railroad Commission that they should take into consideration people's like past compliance problems. So they got kind of double the time, but they're supposed to be looking at whether they're good operators or not. But this is a huge issue. Like Texas needs clean drinking water, and the Railroad Commission is just allowing your main water supplies to be completely polluted. So how does one get a bill sponsor to try to tackle some of these things and help make it better in the future that these things can't get passed so arbitrarily?
Well, Paula, you could certainly work with Sierra Club or Public Citizen. One thing that would probably be good is it's always good when you want a bill sponsored, you look at what someone has sponsored in the past.
Yeah.
For instance, I'm looking down at my sheet. Eddie Morales had 4891 requiring the financial security
Yeah, that's
for a
related.
commercial disposal facility. I am familiar with this facility you're talking about
Okay.
in Elysian Field because I happen to run into Representative Clardy,
Okay.
who's no longer in office. But when I mentioned who the operator was, he said, "Yeah, Rita, they're a bad operator."
Yeah, they're terrible.
And so that's the best way to approach it. But somebody like Cyrus or our organization can help write those bills. The thing is about our legislature, it meets every 2 years.
Oh, I know.
So for your sake, I don't know what status Elysian Fields is going to be in by then, but it's definitely a problem because Senator Nichols and I and Clardy all killed a land farm near Chirino. So
Uh-huh.
I've worked on land farms. So
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, I'm aware that we just missed our slot. We did try to put something together. I actually drafted a little bill and tried to send it around. I know how to draft. I'm a lawyer. I can draft legislation,
right.
but I need somebody to sponsor it and take it up as an interest. And um, it's so bad and it ties into the bill you're mentioning about needing to notify public schools within so many feet of these things of, different environmental hazards. There was no public hearing about this facility going in. Nobody in the town knew about it. There is a public school within a mile and a half of this toxic landfill. And apparently the school board didn't even know that this thing had been permitted because last year they passed a $55 million bond package, which is huge for this little, 500 or 600 community town to enlarge this school complex that's now going to be within 1.5 miles of this toxic landfill. And these things are getting permitted, like the public had no say. The people that live there, no public hearing, nothing. And so I'd love to find out. I'll look up that bill that was sponsoring that, because, we can't just allow these children to be, in school all day next to a thing where they can't breathe the air and has radioactive dust blowing around the schoolyard from these things. And, it's just a terrible situation. But
Sure.
basically the state put the burden on, there's like 20 of us that own property surrounding this landfill, and the state puts the burden on 20 individual random people to fight these things. And I put together a budget. I figured we needed at least $200,000 to have fought this, probably more. And some of the landowners, most of us don't even live in Texas, and some people are in their 90s, and some people only own like 5 acres, and they're like, it would cost me more than my land's worth. So, these operators bank on the fact that no individual people have the money or the knowledge of how to fight these things.
That's how industry works, period, on most
Well, I've never
all
seen something as
permits.
egregious as this. Really.
Well, often permits are fought by a few citizens collectively having to band together to do it,
Right.
unfortunately. But
Well,
what
if y'all's drinking water in future doesn't taste so good, I'm trying to be the canary in the coal mine, letting you guys know what's happening in East Texas, because our water is going to be used to, if San Antonio already gets 7% of their water from this aquifer. And, other cities, I grew up in Georgetown, Texas, and Georgetown just signed a 4-year contract to get water from this aquifer. So towns around the state are buying this water, and I don't think they have any idea that it's being polluted, what they're buying. So.
Well, Paula, you can always, why don't you get a hold of me, or Rajana's got my email address if you want to have a further discussion on it. So,
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
sure.
Great. Thank you for that. Yes, Rita, your email, I just added it to the chat because we won't be able to get to the question submitted earlier. So sorry about that, everyone. We will take one last question briefly from Robert.
Oh,
That's me. Probably.
yes, go.
Oh, I wanted some clarification on the advanced nuclear reactors. It isn't, they didn't say how much money that could be used, and how much is it per unit? It was started out at 250 million. Is that what it is?
I'd have to double check, Linda.
Okay, so is it
what
in
it
the,
is.
in the
I'd
bill?
have to double check the bill because I track, I look at so many bills.
Okay, I'll do that.
But I can find out for you.
Okay, I can find out, because I thought it was 250 million at one, and it was supposed to be a reimbursement, but of course, if they don't build the facility, they don't have to return the money.
Right. Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I don't have more on that. I also want to mention, I saw something in the chat about what are they going to do about flood control. I will tell you there's bills filed, about 6 or 7, a guide on how to prepare for a flood. There's a bill by Angie Chinbutton on disaster recovery funds for small businesses. There are a few bills regarding camps built in floodplains. There's bills on funding emergency systems, which the governor's discussed. Alerts that should go out in English and Spanish. So those are some of the bills regarding the flooding we just had in the Hill Country. So for those of you, I know someone asked about it. And then somebody asked me about, are they going to tie flooding money to redistricting? No, it won't be tied to that. So they do a lot of crazy things at the legislature, but not that in this case. So.
Great. Thank you so much, Rita, for the clarification on those. Again, if anyone has any follow-up questions or additional questions arise after you let this information really meld, please feel free to give Rita an email. I want to give a few very brief announcements and updates. So for those who are more local to DFW, specifically in Arlington, there will be a permit hearing on 4 new wells that Total Energies has requested from the city of Arlington. They went through their first initial approval step process, and they got the approval from the Planning and Zoning Committee from the city of Arlington. And the city council will again give their first round of voting on these permits on August 5th. That's a Tuesday. Also, relevant to anyone who lives in the area and also those who are just concerned about the environment, in the first few weeks of May, there were 2,600 barrels of crude oil that leaked from a damaged pipe owned by Energy Transfers, which is a Dallas-based pipeline company. These 2,600 barrels of oil were released near Lake Arlington. Specifically, the damaged pipe was on the south side of East Lancaster Avenue, about 3/4 a mile west of Green Oaks. And the leaked oil, unfortunately, flowed into the Fort Worth sewer line. And so the city of Fort Worth, the taxpayers, will be paying for the cleanup of this oil spill, not Energy Transfers, the actual pipeline company. And Rita, Ranjana dropped some links in the chat that are ways you can keep in touch with us. The best way to get updates on local oil and gas news is signing up for our newsletter. That's that first link. And we are always interested in having volunteers. So whether it's tabling, going door to door, informing people about hearings, turning out to hearings, please sign up for our volunteer list there. Ranjan, I'm gonna pass it on to you for anything I missed and some concluding remarks.
No, thank you so much. I just wanted to say, if you live in Arlington and you want to stay in touch with us, those are ways to keep in touch. We're always looking for engaging with neighborhoods and engaging more people who face the gas well threat and all the other environmental issues that we all collectively face here. Thank you all for attending. And in closing, I would like to thank our speaker, Rita Beving, for a very informative presentation. It's rare to find someone with such a broad interest and knowledge in environmental issues and such a long history of engaging with so many of them. And this engagement and involvement in the legislative process and this keen interest in and knowledge of the personalities and the way in which the process works. So we've really enjoyed the presentation today and learned so much because, as you said, thousands of bills are filed. And we really appreciate your highlighting the important ones that are, of great concern and impact to all of us. So thank you so much for this presentation, and I'd like to thank everybody who attended as well.
Well, thanks for having me.
A pleasure. Okay, good night, everybody. Chioma, are we wrapping up?
Yes, I was just gonna say good night, everyone.
Okay, good night and have a lovely rest of the evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye.
Thank you.